Alright, so we're here in the condo in Bloomington. Very nice. They kept this one up really good. Everything's super pristine and clean.
My God! Oh my God! She should be here! My daughter came face to face with pure evil that New Year's Eve.
Those words, spoken by a grieving mother in a Minneapolis courtroom, captured the unspeakable horror of what happened to her daughter on the final night of 2019. Mon'nique Ba was a 28-year-old real estate agent and mother of two young daughters who would be found executed in a Minneapolis alley after being lured to what she thought was just another routine house showing. But before we get to the devastating events of that New Year's Eve, let me take you back to where this nightmare truly began. Mon'nique Ba was everything a 28-year-old woman could be proud of. Born on October 17, 1991 in Minneapolis, she'd worked her way from serving tables to building a thriving career in real estate with Chris Lindahl Real Estate, one of the city's most prominent agencies. Her family remembers her as having an infectious glow, a confidence that drew people in, and a heart of gold that always put her two daughters first. Those little girls, just 1 and 3 years old at the time, were the absolute center of Mon'nique's world. She'd read to them every night using a special purple pillow, a ritual so cherished that her family would later create a children's book called Ruby and Onyx and the Magical Pillow Adventure to keep her memory alive for them. But Mon'nique's personal life was far from the picture-perfect stability she worked so hard to create for her daughters. She was in a complicated relationship with John Mitchell Momo, an aspiring rapper who performed under the name Momo. They shared the townhome in St. Anthony Village where he'd stay with the children while Mon'nique worked her demanding schedule of property showings and client meetings. Their relationship had seen its share of turbulence, marked by periods of separation driven by his infidelity, substance use, and what Mon'nique's mother, Wanda Williams Ba, viewed as a dangerously flashy lifestyle. Wanda, a medical laboratory technician who frequently provided childcare support, had grown increasingly concerned about John's social media presence. He'd post videos flaunting cash, making what appeared to be drug references, and generally projecting an image that Wanda feared could attract the wrong kind of attention. Wanda had actually warned her daughter about these concerns, telling Mon'nique that John's image could get them killed for a like, for a love, for a share. It was a mother's intuition born from a lifetime of understanding how streets worked, how jealousy operated, and how violence could erupt from the most unexpected places. Despite these warnings, Mon'nique and John had reconciled around the 2019 holidays, trying once again to make things work for the sake of their family. She had no way of knowing that John's connections in the music industry had already set in motion a chain of events that would cost her everything. The seeds of what would become Mon'nique's murder were planted months earlier in the deteriorating business relationship between John and Lyndon Akeem Wiggins, a 40-year-old drug dealer who fancied himself a music mogul operating under the stage name Black Bag L.A. Wiggins ran Black Bag Entertainment and had signed John to his label with promises of a $1 million record deal. The two had spent time together in California, where John had made impressive connections with high-profile artists like Nipsey Hussle and XXXTentacion. But what should have been a mutually beneficial partnership had curdled into something toxic and dangerous. The rift between them wasn't just about music. Wiggins, who was simultaneously running a large-scale fentanyl and marijuana trafficking operation, had come to be intensely jealous of John's independent success in the industry. Text messages recovered by investigators would later show Wiggins threatening to sue John and making references to nearly catching a murder case after a confrontation. But the jealousy was compounded by something even more dangerous in the criminal underworld. Wiggins had come to believe that John was cooperating with authorities, informing on his drug activities. In Wiggins' world, being labeled a snitch was a death sentence, and he decided that John needed to pay. The problem was getting to him. That's where Mon'nique would become tragically useful. Wiggins didn't work alone in orchestrating what prosecutors would later call one of Minneapolis's most complex murder cases. He had his girlfriend, Elsa Segura, a 31-year-old former Hennepin County probation officer who'd somehow crossed the line from supervising offenders to becoming one herself. Segura would play the crucial role of luring Mon'nique to her death, using the very professionalism and trust that made Mon'nique good at her job as the weapon against her. In the final days of December 2019, as families across Minneapolis prepared for New Year's Eve celebrations, Wiggins set his plan in motion. The conspiracy he orchestrated would exploit every vulnerability in Mon'nique's life: her professional obligation to meet potential clients, her trust in the systems meant to verify identities, and her complete lack of awareness that her boyfriend's feuds had made her a target. What Mon'nique thought would be just another house showing in the quiet suburb of Maple Grove would instead become the opening scene of an unthinkable nightmare. Days before New Year's Eve, Cedric Berry walked into a Metro PCS store and purchased a burner phone. Cell phone tower data later placed Lyndon Wiggins near that very store during the purchase, and minutes later near Elsa Segura's home just before she made the fateful call that would lure Mon'nique to her death. The phone was activated under a false name at a bogus address, used for one purpose only: to contact Mon'nique and arrange what would appear to be a legitimate house showing. On December 31st, sometime in the late morning or early afternoon, Mon'nique received a call from someone identifying themselves as Lisa Pawalski, a prospective buyer interested in viewing a vacant property in Maple Grove. Around 3 p.m. that afternoon, Mon'nique arrived at the vacant home in her BMW, dressed professionally and carrying the materials she'd need for the showing. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's camera captured what happened next, and it's the kind of footage that would later become crucial evidence in court. A U-Haul truck with Arizona license plates backed into the driveway shortly after Mon'nique's arrival. Two men, later identified as Cedric Berry and Barry Davis, exited the truck and entered the home. And what should have been a quick introduction to potential buyers instead became an ambush. The men forcibly grabbed Mon'nique and dragged her toward the U-Haul. She fought. We know she fought because of what investigators would later find: 4 pink acrylic press-on nails torn from her fingers, scattered in the cargo area of that truck, alongside zip ties and duct tape. The men bound her wrists, loaded her into the back of the U-Haul like cargo, and the truck pulled away from the quiet Maple Grove street, leaving Mon'nique's BMW behind as the only evidence that she'd ever been there. What happened over the next several hours represents some of the most disturbing testimony that would emerge in the trials that followed. Mon'nique was tortured inside that U-Haul truck. Physical evidence found on her body during the autopsy would reveal scratches covering her skin, bruises that indicated she'd been struck repeatedly, and a chipped tooth that spoke to the violence of the assault. The men weren't just restraining her, they were interrogating her, demanding information and using pain to force her compliance. They wanted to know the address where John Mitchell Momo could be found. Prosecutors would later argue that Mon'nique resisted revealing John's location for as long as she could, likely trying to protect not just John but her 2 young daughters who she knew were at home with him. Her mother Wanda would testify about this, breaking down as she explained how Mon'nique would have fought to keep that information from her captors, knowing what revealing it would mean for her babies. But eventually, under the sustained brutality of the torture, Mon'nique gave them what they wanted. She gave them the address of the townhome in St. Anthony Village where her family was spending the New Year's Eve afternoon. The U-Haul, now carrying a tortured and terrified Mon'nique, made its way to that address. Using Mon'nique's own keys, the custom purple key fob with a green butterfly that Wanda would later recognize among the toys scattered on the floor, one of the men approached the townhome. John Mitchell Momo was inside, babysitting his daughters while waiting for Mon'nique to return from work. He had no warning of what was about to happen. The masked gunman, wearing a black ski mask with a single eye hole cut out, entered the home and opened fire. John was shot 3 times, the bullets tearing through his body as his daughters watched in terror. Somehow, despite the severity of his injuries, John managed to flee upstairs. He shielded the children in a bedroom and called 911, his voice captured on a recording that would later be played in court, a recording that included the sound of one of his daughters crying for her mother. The gunman didn't pursue him upstairs, as the attack on John wasn't about finishing the job. It was about sending a message, about inflicting maximum psychological damage on anyone. But John Mitchell Momo survived those shots and lived to testify about what happened, to identify the connections between Wiggins and the attack, to explain the music industry beef and the accusations of snitching that had motivated this horror. Mon'nique Ba would not be so fortunate. With John bleeding out upstairs and the children traumatized beyond measure, the men returned to the U-Haul where Mon'nique remained captive. Her usefulness to them had ended as she'd served her purpose in leading to John. Now she was just a witness, a loose end, a woman who could identify her attackers and describe everything that had happened. Around 6:38 that evening, as New Year's Eve celebrations were beginning across Minneapolis, Mon'nique Ba's body was discovered in an alley in the 1300 block of Russell Avenue North. She'd been shot 3 times at point-blank range, twice in the torso and once in the face. Her hands were still bound with the duct tape that had restrained her throughout her hours of captivity and torture. The men who killed her had dumped her in that alley like garbage, showing the same callousness they displayed throughout this entire conspiracy.
Mon'nique did not have to die. I didn't have to throw her out like she was garbage either. My baby was so precious to me, to all of us.
The investigation moved quickly. John Mitchell Momo, despite his injuries, immediately identified Lyndon Wiggins as the likely mastermind, explaining the music industry beef and the accusations of snitching that had motivated this horror. Surveillance footage from multiple locations provided a timeline of the U-Haul's movements. The truck itself was recovered, and inside it, investigators found the evidence of Mon'nique's torture, those pink acrylic nails, the zip ties, and an overwhelming smell of ammonia that suggested the perpetrators had attempted to clean up evidence. Cell phone records traced the burner phone back to the Metro PCS purchase, and tower data placed key suspects at crucial locations. On January 2, 2020, police arrested Cedric Berry, initially charging him with second-degree murder. They found his Buick Regal, the tan sedan that witnesses had reported seeing near the alley where Mon'nique's body was dumped. Inside that vehicle, investigators discovered 13 pouches of heroin and the black ski mask with the single eye hole, the same mask that had been worn during the home invasion. Barry Alexander Davis was arrested shortly after, and by November 2020, authorities had built enough evidence to charge Lyndon Wiggins as the mastermind behind the entire conspiracy. The legal proceedings that followed would stretch across 5 years and involve multiple trials, appeals, and reversals. In June 2021, Cedric Derry and Barry Davis were tried together and convicted of aiding and abetting first-degree premeditated murder, kidnapping, and attempted first-degree murder of John Mitchell Momo. Judge Peter Cahill sentenced both men to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At sentencing, Barry expressed remorse for what had happened, while Davis questioned the verdict, maintaining he'd had limited involvement. But the evidence against them was overwhelming.
I do think they proved it. The jury thought they proved it. I think they did quite a good job of proving it, as a matter of fact.
Judge Peter Cahill didn't waver when he handed down the mandatory life sentence.
There will be no possibility of release.
Elsa Segura was tried separately in 2021 and convicted of aiding and abetting first-degree murder, initially receiving a life sentence for her role in luring Mon'nique to the fake house showing. Lyndon Wiggins went to trial in 2022 and was also convicted, sentenced to life without parole for orchestrating the entire plot. But then, something unexpected happened. The Minnesota Supreme Court, reviewing the cases on appeal, found that jury instructions in both Segura's and Wiggins's trials had materially misstated the law regarding accomplice liability. The instructions had allowed juries to convict based on whether the crimes were reasonably foreseeable, rather than requiring proof that the defendants specifically knew about and intended to aid the murders. Both convictions are overturned and sent back for retrial.
Guys, good morning to you. The case for a retrial this morning stems from the instructions the judge gave the jury over in the first trial when it comes to aiding and abetting. Now, aiding and abetting, that matters because that's what Lyndon Wiggins was convicted of 3 years ago related to premeditated first-degree murder, kidnapping, and other charges. But now the 40-year-old is getting a new trial. The Minnesota Supreme Court stepped in, saying the judge's instructions to the jury right before deliberations deviated too far from the standard.
They were not given enough of the law, and that without that would be a very unfair trial to the defendant.
Yeah, so prosecutors are expected to use the same evidence during this retrial, but of course, this time around, prosecutors and the judge must make it clear to the jury what exactly aiding and abetting actually entails. Back to you.
This coming New Year's will mark 2 years since my daughter Mon'nique Ba was kidnapped and murdered.
Wanda Williams Ba has spent a lot of time in courtrooms over the last 2 years since her daughter Mon'nique was murdered.
Facing a retrial, Elsa Segura accepted a plea deal in September 2024, pleading guilty to kidnapping in exchange for a 20-year sentence. With time served and good behavior, she could potentially be released around 2033. Mon'nique's family was outraged by this outcome, feeling that the plea deal was far too lenient given Segura's crucial role in the conspiracy. They felt excluded from the process and viewed the reduced sentence as a betrayal of justice. Lyndon Wiggins's retrial began on October 6, 2025, with jury selection taking an entire week due to the high-profile nature of the case and extensive pre-trial publicity. Opening statements began on October 14th, with prosecutors Paige Starkey and Chris Filipski emphasizing that Wiggins was the common denominator, the only person with a clear motive for wanting John Mitchell Momo hurt. Defense attorney Sarah Gadd argued that the evidence was insufficient, suggesting that John's flashy social media presence might have attracted other enemies. The testimony that followed was contentious and emotional. John Mitchell Momo took the stand describing the music industry jealousy and the drug accusations in heated exchanges with attorneys. The next day, Wanda Williams Ba testified about her maternal intuition, about discovering that purple key with the butterfly fob among the scattered toys, about how she'd known something was terribly wrong even before the police confirmed her worst fears. On November 20th, 2025, the jury returned a guilty verdict. Lyndon Wiggins was convicted of first-degree premeditated murder and the death of Mon'nique Ba, attempted first-degree murder of John Mitchell Momo, and kidnapping. On December 22, 2025, Judge Mark Kappelhoff sentenced Wiggins to life in prison without the possibility of parole, calling him the criminal architect of a plot that had destroyed multiple lives. A motion for a third trial was denied, and as of today, Wiggins remains incarcerated with no successful appeals pending. The aftermath of Mon'nique Ba's murder extends far beyond the courtroom. Wanda Williams Ba now has custody of her 2 granddaughters, who spend weekends with their grandfather, Frank. The girls maintain a daily ritual of greeting their mother's photograph, a poignant reminder of the woman they lost when they were far too young to understand why. This case exposed dangerous vulnerabilities in the real estate profession, where agents routinely meet strangers at vacant properties with minimal verification of client identities. The National Association of Realtors has since emphasized safety protocols, including buddy systems, client verification apps, and never attending showings alone at vacant properties. But for Mon'nique's family, no safety protocol implemented after the fact can bring her back or undo the trauma inflicted on 2 little girls who watched their father get shot and lost their mother forever. What do you think about this case? Do you think Mon'nique should have never gone back to John? Let me know what you think in the comments section below. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this one.